When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, our west coast became a potential combat zone. Living in that zone were more than 100,000 persons of Japanese ancestry, 2/3 of them American citizens, 1/3 aliens. We knew that some among them were potentially dangerous. Most were loyal. But no one knew what would happen among this concentrated population if Japanese forces should try to invade our shores. Military authorities therefore determined that all of them, citizens and aliens alike, would have to move. Neither the Army nor the War Relocation Authority relished the idea of taking men, women, and children from their homes, their shops, and their farms. So the military and civilian agencies alike determined to do the job as a democracy should, with real consideration for the people involved.
It just seemed as though they did unnecessary things. They let us out to stretch our legs. We said we're the ones who are going to be loyal to the U.S. Soldiers who were accompanying us surrounded us, stood side by side. They were carrying rifles with bayonets on the end. We just accepted our fate. Where were we going to go in this places like Eastern Washington, where there's nothing but just valleys and mountains? We weren't going to be able to go anywhere, but these soldiers did what they were told to do, so they were following orders too.
Growing up, I remember my grandparents, especially my grandmother, telling us stories about my family. I would often hear stories about my childhood, like the time I made a Thanksgiving turkey out of a pine cone and construction paper as a gift to her, about family Easter egg hunts with eggs hidden so well that even the person who hid the egg couldn't find it. I heard stories about my father and his siblings, like when my uncle was a contestant on Jeopardy, or when my aunt and uncle would jump on my father's bed screaming, "Teenager, teenager, take us for a drive." But the stories I heard so rarely were about their own childhoods. That chapter in their lives, much like that chapter in American history, remained quiet. In recent years, my grandmother began telling these stories of her experience in the camps, but the full story remained incomplete. I realized that in order to know my history, to tell my full story, I needed to hear them tell theirs.
My father came in 1913 or 14, and he went back to Japan and brought my mother back, I believe around 1918, 19. He ran the Seattle Japanese Chamber of Commerce and Association of North America, and that was created to coordinate the activities of the Japanese community. Many who came over could not speak English, so he arranged for them to be housed in usually Japanese-owned apartments.
My father came in the early 1900s, so he had to move to Central California. He did nursery work. He used to graft fruit trees and things like that. Once I remember he wanted to teach me how to do some of that, so I went with him to work, and he was up climbing a tree to prune. He was talking to me about what to cut and not to cut, and he looked back and he saw that I had fallen asleep on the tree. He was quite upset about that. He said, "If you're going to do that," he said, "I'm not going to teach you how to prune trees." I can't think of anything other than just a normal life.
My father was interned on December 7th, and they came at night, and they went through all the desks and tried to find anything that should be confiscated, and they didn't find anything, any contrabands or anything like that. I was only 14, and I didn't really know enough about what was going to happen. I didn't even think we would be evacuated.
On the day that Pearl Harbor happened, I was out in the field gathering wood. When that happened, I didn't know anything about it until I think somebody came and said that Pearl Harbor was bombed. But I didn't really know anything more about it until that evening when we went to church, and at that time they said that Pearl Harbor was bombed and that we were at war. But I thought it was a stupid thing for them to do. All I knew is that everything was going fine. Well, what we found out was that we had been restricted to within so many miles of the house. One man came and took all the shortwave radios, confiscated them. We had to disenroll, I guess, from college. Notices went up all over saying that we were going to be evacuated. We were told to take only what we could carry. I didn't feel any animosity towards the government for doing it. I remember riding on the back of a truck with what we had, and I was singing, and my sister got mad at me. She said, "You shouldn't be singing at a time like this." Nothing I could do about it.
We were evacuated, I believe, on May 20th, 1942. And my father was in a high-profile position. And since my brother and sister were working, we managed, because of their income. We sold, of course, all the things for which my father had worked. We went down to Pinedale, California, which is right outside Fresno. The barracks had just been put up, but the barracks had been hastily built by anyone who could swing a hammer. There were spaces in between the lumber. There were no ceilings, just partitions. We could hear what the neighbors were saying. So if a child next door cried, why, the whole barrack could hear. The barracks were divided into 5 sections, and it was just one room, and we needed privacy, so my brother hung sheets so that the girls could have some privacy.
Some were living in stables. That assembly camp was a little different from me because there was not enough room for the whole family. They took me out as an adult and put me in the open barracks with all the single males. The ones for the bachelors were just an open, like a hall with bunks lined up along the sides. We were assigned a bunk, and that was it.
We all had to go to this area where they had laundry tubs. We had outhouses. When we went to take a shower, there was no privacy. There were no partitions, so we bathed nude with other people.
The toilets were all lined up on one end with no separation, and showers were available, but again, no stalls. It was just open showers.
The food was just very, very poor. I remember that our first meal was some vegetables floating in hot water.
The only obvious presence of the military was the towers along the edge of the camp where they were all the time. My mother was, she was in the hospital the whole time we were in Arkansas. So we used to go visit her. One time she was real happy when I brought a jar full of fireflies. So and she was watching that. But she died shortly after that. I wasn't entirely happy living in a camp, but that it was one of those things that had to be. I think there's a Japanese term that says shikata ga nai, means
Can't be helped.
Can't be helped. There was a man in Chicago who was assigned by the government to find work for internees. When there were jobs available, he would notify us, and if we wanted to take one of those jobs, we could ask for release from the camp.
Dad went to Chicago and worked there. And he was working as a machinist, and they investigated his family. They found out that my father was interned in, I believe, Lordsburg, New Mexico at that time. And so he was fired from his job. They said, "You're a security risk." There were bus companies who came in and wanted to take us to Yellowstone. On the way home, there was the bus driver stopped at a gasoline station, and this gas station owner would not sell gas to us. One lady went to the bathroom. She was chased out of the bathroom. I felt like getting out and telling those people, well, I have two brothers who are serving in the U.S. Army. They're translators, and the boys in the 100th and 442nd have put their lives on the line, and they have fought for the U.S. Why don't you think about those people who have done their duties and have remained loyal to the U.S.? They just thought of us as the enemy and did not treat us with much respect.
My older brother was in the 442nd. We never talked about our military experiences.
Uncle Ken, who was quite fluent in Japanese, volunteered for the Army Language School. There were people who resented his doing this. He said, there were those who said they don't trust us and put us in camps, and yet you're volunteering for the Army? And he said, our future in this country is going to depend on what we do now.
In 1943, the U.S. government began drafting Japanese American men into specific units of the Army. The All Nisei 100th Battalion and 442nd Regiment became infamous for the acts of courage and sacrifice. After a battalion of Texans were lost behind enemy lines and previous attempts had failed, the 442nd was sent in. These men succeeded in saving that battalion, but not before taking heavy casualties of their own. The 100th took so many casualties that they became known as the Purple Heart Battalion. Other men, like my grandfather, joined the Military Intelligence Service and worked as translators in the Pacific. Their actions helped bring an end to the war in the Pacific.
We received the Congressional Gold Medal. I felt that it was something I had to do.
I believe they called it the Ploesti oil fields. And Ben Kuroki was the on that tail gunner, I believe he was. I think on the way back, the plane in which he was riding was struck by artillery and he was knocked out. But someone put an oxygen mask on his face and he survived and came back. And as he sailed into New York Harbor, gave thanks. He says, I'm not a praying man, but I gave thanks that I came back. Well, Senator Inoue, as you know, lost his right arm on his way home to Hawaii while wearing his uniform and a chest full of medals. Stopped at a barber shop in San Francisco. He was thrown out of there while the owner yelled, "We don't cut Jap hair." He said, "Look, I've served in the army. Look at all that I have done. I even lost my right arm."
It took a long time for attitudes to change. It wasn't until 1988 that the U.S. formally apologized to the Japanese American people. The 442nd, 100th, and Military Intelligence Service weren't awarded the Congressional Gold Medal until 2011.
The only thing I have to say is I still don't have any animosity towards the government for doing what they did. To me, it was a big adventure.
This person who is president of the student body at Oberlin College said, if you think we're having problems, our problems are a drop in the bucket compared to what the blacks are experiencing in the South. When the civil rights movement gained momentum, all minority groups, I believe, benefited from what they did.
When I listen to the stories they tell, the situations they were in, the choices they made, I can't help but wonder what it would be like for me. If I were in their shoes, would I swear to be loyal? Would I hold no animosity and anger in my heart towards the armed soldiers with their bayonets pointed at me? Would I be able to take up arms to defend the country that had so recently imprisoned me for no reason other than the lineage of my family? I've been told that people never know what they would do until they're in the situation. Maybe I would do the same thing they did. Maybe I wouldn't, I don't know. All I know is I'm proud to be their grandson, and I'm proud to share their story, Nisei's story, an American story.